Earlier this evening, the Scottish Labour leader Johann Lamont came into our Glasgow newsroom. I asked her why they had gone back on their interim report's proposals to devolve all income tax.
Well, we did look at that. In the interim report, the caveat we put in the report is as long as it wasn't to the detriment of the people of Scotland. So we looked at it. The pensions industry, a lot of advice we got would be that actually it would cost people money in terms of their pensions and savings. That was one reason. But I actually think what happened during the second year, one of the things we'd focused on around taxation was this idea there's a fiscal gap, there's a gap between what Scottish Parliament can spend and what it can raise, and we wanted to look at how you could get that balance right. And I think that was the driver behind the initial view that we should look at devolving all income tax.
But hang on. The idea that you can't devolve powers over all income tax because savings would be affected, I don't understand that.
Well, the cost of running pensions and so on was going to be more expensive. We took advice from the pensions industry
on that. Why would it be more expensive?
Well, that was the advice we got from them, and we took that view that actually to devolve all of that would cost more than the benefits from it. But let me finish the point about where we got to. Because where we got to around, yes, there's an issue around fiscal accountability, but we also thought that there's this question, at what point does the strength of the United Kingdom break? We believe very strongly the United Kingdom is about sharing risk and resources, it is about pooling risk, and it is about redistributing out of better off parts of the United Kingdom into poorer bits. And we didn't want to put ourselves in a position where what we were doing was importing risk into the Scottish budget. We thought there was a balance there to be struck, and that's the view that we've taken.
What do you think the basic rate of tax should be in Scotland?
It's currently 20 pence.
And what do you think it should be?
I'm happy with it being at that stage, but what I should say to you on the issue of taxation, we want to talk today about the powers the Scottish Parliament should have. There is a separate argument about how those powers are used. There is a dialogue we need to have with people in Scotland.
If I'm a voter sitting watching this, saying, look, I've got to make up my mind this referendum debate. These people have had 3p power, variation power in Scottish taxes, income tax, since the Scottish Parliament was set up. They've never used it. The Calman Commission was going to bring it up to 10p, and now you're saying 15p. It doesn't make a blind bit of difference to anything. I mean, unless you've got proposals to change the rate of income tax in Scotland by more than 3p, then frankly, whether it's 10p or 15p doesn't make a blind bit of difference to anything.
In terms of fiscal accountability, it does, because it's about responsibility. But also what we're outlining today is what we think the powers of the Parliament should be. It's an entirely different argument to be had with the voters ahead of 2016 about how those powers should be exercised. One of the big arguments I think we've lost in my lifetime is around taxation. It is around taxation, that idea.
But I still don't see what the difference is. If you're not proposing to change income tax at all.
I didn't say that with respect. We will make clearer tax proposals ahead of the 2016 election, but what we can't have is a situation we have just now, where it's basically there's an alibi, where Alex Salmond will tell you all of the things he wants to do, but he doesn't tell you how he's going to fund them.
Well, let me put it another way. How is the difference between 10p and 15p? What's it actually for?
Well, it is about
purpose?
The purpose is to have that flexibility to make that decision about how much money you want to raise in tax to fund public services.
But it's got no practical effects whatsoever.
Well, I don't agree with you on that. I think it's actually
very significant. But you've just told me you don't want to change the basic rate of income tax.
Well, but there is flexibility across the other rates, and what I've said to you is that the debate around this will come ahead of 2016. We need to have a mature conversation about actually the extent to which people are prepared to pay taxation for the services.
You want a power to raise the higher rates of income tax. That's just the 45p rate, is that correct? Not the 40p rate?
Yes, the 40p rate as well.
So you want to raise the power to raise both
I want the power and the flexibility to make those decisions, but that is again subject to the agreement of the people of Scotland in an election. That's what we would discuss ahead of 2016. No.
What on earth is the logic of that?
Well, what you of course have already got the power to lower the taxes across all of the bands, and we think there's an argument which says if you're going to lower at the top rate, you can lower at all of the levels. But what we don't want is a position. The concern, of course, around corporation tax is tax competition. We took the judgment that actually there might be an issue if you had the flexibility to cut as well as raise the top level. You might create a degree of tax competition across the United Kingdom. Again, the balance is the extent to which the sharing union, the cooperative, the sharing pooling risk and resources actually holds the United Kingdom together, which is why we don't want to import too much responsibility onto the Scottish budget. But equally, we don't end up in a position where there's a race to the bottom on taxation.
But hang on, what you're proposing is that the Scottish Parliament should be able to put tax rates up to 50p, which would arguably put Scotland at a disadvantage when it comes to tax competition with England, but it shouldn't be allowed to lower the top rate of tax, which would arguably put Scotland at an advantage.
We don't want tax competition, but we equally...
But you're going to have tax competition. If you put the tax rate up to 50p, you've got tax competition.
Well, you would have to do that with the consent of the people of Scotland, but what I'm saying to you is, in tough times, as we've agreed across the United Kingdom as a Labour movement, in tough times, perhaps those with the broadest shoulders should carry the heaviest burden. And we do believe that it's actually important to have that flexibility.
But of course, what your critics will say is that what you're ruling in is Scotland making tax changes which could put itself at a disadvantage when it comes to tax rates in the rest of the UK. And what you're specifically ruling out is Scotland changing tax in a way that could put itself at an advantage.
Well, what we certainly don't want is a nationalist government to come in and cut the top rate of top rate of income tax and end up effectively almost breaking the union by the back door. But what we are saying, that in an election where we make clear what our tax proposals are, we at least have that choice. What we currently have is a government which says, I'll tell you all the things I can't do, and by the way, and under independence, everything will be fantastic, and we don't have to address tax,
which is that you are ruling out Scotland putting itself in a position in terms of tax competition which is arguably, some would disagree, advantageous, in other words, offering lower tax rates at the top end, and you're specifically ruling out well, you're ruling out putting itself in a position which is advantageous and ruling in putting itself at a disadvantage.
Well,
that seems
almost
uniquely one-sided.
I don't agree with you, but I'm a Labour politician and I want a progressive and a fair taxation system. And I actually think the flexibility that we've developed in this is an important opportunity for us.
Do you, as a matter of fact, should you come to power in Scotland, want to put taxes up to 50p?
Once you have the power, you then have that. We make those decisions ahead of 2016 and we will put them before the people of Scotland.
So incidentally, what happens if, let's say the Scottish Parliament decided to put top rate of tax up to 50p and lots of high earners just left or based themselves in England and they thought, oh, well, that wasn't a very good idea, let's put it back down again. Would they be forbidden from doing that?
No, they can do that. What they can't
I thought
do,
you said they couldn't put it down.
They can't reduce it below what the level is set at a UK level.
Oh, so it's the UK that determines that?
Well, we have accepted that. We're part of the United Kingdom.
What if Ed Balls should become Chancellor of the Exchequer and he says, right, I'm going to put the top rate up to 50p? Can the Scottish Parliament say, no, we're not going to do that, we'll just keep it at 45?
I wouldn't have thought so. Why would we do that?
Well, would we have the power to do that as well?
The power we've got is not to cut below what the UK rate is. So the UK rate is set, and then we can't cut below that. So if they put taxes up,
we have to put them up?
Yes.
And if they put taxes down...
Well, to the top rate, yes.
Well, if they put the top rate down, we don't have to do that?
It's quite basic, because, of course, we're still part of the United Kingdom. We've accepted the macroeconomic policy should be decided at a UK level. What we want round about that is flexibility.
See, again, you're critical. This is a very peculiar way to run a tax system.
Well, you may think it's peculiar, but then what we have here is an interesting combination of us being part of the United Kingdom, which shares and pools risk and resource, but also gives the Scottish Parliament accountability.
What about tax bans? Can we change them?
No.
Now, you want housing benefit devolved. How does that tie in? If you devolve housing benefit and it's part of universal credit, how does that work?
Well, we believe that it is possible to take it out of universal credit. We will, of course...
You want to take it out of universal credit?
Well, we have to
but
identify
then universal
it
credit
separately.
isn't universal credit.
Yes, no, I appreciate that. But what we recognise that it is possible to divide it in that kind of way, because, of course, the thing about housing benefit, it aligns very closely with housing policy, which is with the Scottish Parliament. We're very keen that monies that accrue from housing benefit were used more effectively. Currently, a very significant amount of housing benefit goes to fund people who are living in the private sector, much of which is very good, but some of which is operated by rogue landlords who benefit from public funding, don't manage their tenancies and don't manage their tenants. And that has a huge impact on our local communities. And related to that is the whole question of how you make sure that housing associations and housing cooperatives have a proper rental stream, which actually has been made more vulnerable.
So I understand you correctly. You're in favour of universal credit, but you want to take housing benefit, which for many people is an important part of it, out of it.
Because we want to find a system where the housing benefit
but then there wouldn't be a universal credit system,
which is much more closely allied with housing policy. The experts in the field tell us these things can be done. We don't know at this stage how far along the mayhem that the UK government has caused around universal credit will be, but we believe it is possible to do this because it's so important in terms of housing
policy. But you say experts tell you, but you haven't actually worked this out, have you?
Oh no, we've identified that it is possible to do it. What we're clearly not going to make
But it would
anybody's...
mean getting rid of universal credit in Scotland.
No, I don't think that's true. We don't want to make anybody's individual income vulnerable. We accept that. But it is possible to recognise a very significant amount of funding can be used more effectively in terms of our housing policy.
Now, you say the Barnett formula should continue, which is fine for you to say. Can you imagine a situation where a Scottish government says, right, we're going to be bold, we're going to have a Baltic states policy in taxation, we're going to cut tax across the board 5p in the pound, which would mean that the Barnett money, while it might be the same, would be a greater proportion, obviously, of reduced tax revenues in Scotland. And everyone in the rest of the UK is going to say, that's absolutely fine.
Well, I think the Barnett formula works for the United Kingdom. Clearly, if you've got a tax-cutting agenda...
But if Scotland did that, surely even a Labour government in London would say, you must be joking.
A tax-cutting agenda, if you had a tax-cutting proposal, Barnett adjusts around that. You would take the risk to yourself of cutting taxation. I accept your view, actually, that there may be a perception around this as one of the reasons we thought that we should keep the basic rate the same, because I can understand why people might think, how can you cut the basic rate and experience the rest of the United Kingdom, despite the fact that it actually wouldn't cost you any more money. So, I mean, we do accept there's an issue there, but we do believe the Barnett formula works for the whole of the United Kingdom. It is a mechanism that has served us well so far.
Yeah, but you're talking about constitutional proposals. You say you intend to keep the basic rate the same, but, you know, sorry to remind you, you're not the Scottish government. The Scottish government can be made up of many different political parties who might have a completely different view. You're making constitutional proposals, and you're now telling me they only work because you have decided as a Labour Party not to change the basic record income tax.
Well, this is Labour's proposal for devolution, but actually, currently you will know that under Calman you can only put down across the three or rise above across the three as well. What we are saying in our proposal, we want more flexibility, but we recognised that if you had flexibility around the basic rate, that may create a reaction in other parts of the United Kingdom, and that is why we're fundamentally keen on doing what proposals that give the Scottish Parliament a great deal more strength, more flexibility, more accountability, but actually holds together the United Kingdom as well, so that we can continue to work in cooperation with our friends and neighbours.
All right, Johann Lamont, thank you very much indeed.